Alright. This is my first time doing this. I'm kind of scared. I'm gonna keep Psych on in the background until I get some friends. Just in case I get no friends, I can still watch Psych. Oh, hi. Alright. Now I have 2 friends. Oh, hell yeah. I think my fresh direct order is gonna come in the middle, so please excuse the door thingy. Oh yay, I'm so glad. The constitutional one? Fuck yeah. So I'm gonna go through guardianship and conservatorship stuff today. I'm gonna drink a little bit, because it is super hot here in New York, and it is insufferable. So what do we do when we're too warm? We hydrate and vasodilate ourselves so that it's worse. So here's to that. Enjoying the freedom to do this in my own home, which, like, maybe Britney doesn't have, which sucks. Jesus. This is my cat up to mischief. So I'm trying to think if I should start off yet with some of the nonsense. Okay, so I can say this now. Hi, Kate. So I'm gonna potentially use, if you listen to our crossover with Page 7 Pop History a while ago, no, it's a cat. It was my demon cat, and then she fled, so, oi, hi. Okay, but if you heard our crossover with Page 7 Pop History, like, maybe half a year ago, when a lot of this conservatorship Britney stuff started coming into the media more, you might have heard me explain that I may interchange guardianship and conservatorship, because in New York it's called guardianship, in California where Britney is, it's called conservatorship. So if I slip into one or the other, just know that those mean the same thing. What else? Oh, the other thing is my qualifications, because I don't want you to think that I'm just pulling this out of my ass, because it is a very specialized field of law, and it's a weird one. Honestly, if you pay attention to the media right now, you'll notice a lot of lawyers aren't commenting on it because, well, A, because honestly we don't have a lot of details, so hopefully you guys don't hate me. I do think that it's a suspect case, but I also think we super don't know what's going on. But point being, it's a super specialized field of law. So my chops, such as they are, I was court attorney for the New York Supreme Court judge who had the inventory of all the guardianships, so equivalent, cases in the Bronx for about 3 years. So I wrote a lot of these decisions. Sat in on the hearings, saw them through from beginning to end, and a lot of times they're really, really sad cases because they're designed for, and this will be my up top definition of what it is. So they're designed for adults, so people over 18 who don't otherwise have guardians. You can't do it if you have a parent or legal guardian already naturally in place. But so for legal adults who are deemed to be incapacitated to the point that they suffer imminent serious harm to their person or finances, and that harm can only be averted if a guardian or conservator is appointed. So you can have personal and or property powers. Whatever you prove, the judge and petitioner and everybody can pick and choose what's needed. But these cases are often for people who are comatose sometimes and facing loss of medical resources, for people with serious mental disability, either new from something like a traumatic brain injury or from like psychosis or severe mental illness. Sometimes there's like a triggering event, which you could argue happened with Britney. She did have kind of a break moment in 2008 that seem to set off this whole thing. Not saying that she needs a conservator or not because of that, but that could be the moment that kind of spurs it. But so the ones that we had that did need this kind of oversight, that needed somebody else looking out for them, oftentimes, ironically, with the Britney case, they were to protect people from family members and like financial exploitation, stuff like that. You see it a lot if somebody is facing eviction. I'm not going to use any names or identifying details when I talk about any of these cases, but I do think it's useful. And Molly Greathouse had asked about, like, okay, so what does a good conservatorship look like? When do you need this sort of thing? So I'll talk about a couple examples. Some of them, they're not funny, but there are funny details. So please excuse me, I'm not trying to be glib. But honestly, for a lot of these, like, you have to laugh so you don't cry. But so like hoarders and really severe hoarding situations where people, one of ours like made the cover of the newspaper because the incapacitated person was hoarding and had a little like roach motel that she had made out of cat food cans, and she refused to get exterminators because she said that the communists were listening in through the walls and that they wanted her to get the extermination, and that the extermination chemicals would excite her sexually, so she wouldn't do it. But so the building was going to evict her, because you can't live like that, especially in a city like New York. But so that's one example. Another example that we had was a gal who was living with a partner. She had some psychiatric difficulties, and I think the partner had been kind of maintaining that. He died of natural causes, and Adult Protective Services showed up when he had been dead for about 5 days. She was still sharing a bed with him and either didn't acknowledge or didn't realize that anything had changed, that he was dead. Then the saddest case, and again, these are all extremes, and so I don't mean to say that Britney has to fall into one of these like crazy categories, because obviously it's the crazy ones that are so easy to decide on. So it's not to say that they're all like this, but just to show, because I've heard a lot of calls for abolishing conservatorships altogether, which I think is really, really dangerous when you think about cases like this, because otherwise these people would be on the street, have no Medicaid, have no benefits, be stolen from. A lot of times people are being abused by their partners physically, and it's just like been a potentially years-long cycle of them being abused and taken advantage of. The saddest one that we had was a 19-year-old gal, so just out of the range of having like a natural guardian. She had an asthma attack, was without oxygen because of that for long enough that she lost brain power, or like all meaningful function. I think she could move some parts of her body and stuff, and maybe recovery was possible, but her parents wanted to treat her with turmeric and medical marijuana. And so they were refusing everything down to like aspirin and mouthwash. And even though she was not a minor, they're like the next in line as decision makers. So you also see that like usually the responsibility goes to family because they step in for basic medical decisions and stuff. Limited scope of what they can do ever. So sometimes even in those cases you have to get a conservator down the line. But if a family member steps in for those immediate medical or psychological needs and is maybe going to cause harm with the choices they're making, then sometimes the hospital or the city or somebody else will petition and be like, hey, there should be a guardian here because this gal's brain injury is not going to be treated by turmeric. So setting the stage there with Again, really extreme cases, not to say that an adequate conservatorship in a more parallel case to Britney's would have to be that crazy to work, but yeah, sometimes it's very necessary. So I'm trying to think of some of the questions that I got and if I should address any of them here. Oh, so yeah, you gotta show the type of harm that you're averting by appointing a guardian. So, and it's tough because these type of things are very subjective and they're very, very sensitive. And so a lot of it falls to judge and fact finder. So whether that's the jury or the judge, it can be different in different cases. But it's one of those cases where like credibility makes a lot of difference, and seeing the people and having direct evidence is very important. And that evidence is often super protected because of HIPAA laws and just general concerns about privacy. So we don't know what the medical evidence was in the beginning of Britney's case. We don't know what it is now. And that's part of why I think you don't hear a lot of lawyers commenting on this in public, because there could be loads more to the story. And that doesn't mean that it's justified. I think the reproductive stuff is just not okay. You know, but for a lot of the things that she said, it's in the context of like her making a statement to the court. It's not formal filings. So I do wonder when she says something like, my team pushed me not to take out my IUD. I think the wording she used was her team told her that she couldn't have any more children. That doesn't necessarily mean that that was a power within the scope of the conservatorship. She could say that she felt pressured by the situation, and she very well could have. She could have felt pressured by the familial situation. If your dad is your business manager and your forever, like, keeper, slash dictator, it sounds like, from just knowing separately about her early life, and now he has control of a lot of your finances and maybe certain personal decisions, and that person tells you you shouldn't have any more kids. Plus there's that custody stuff that she did lose custody of her kids in the past, so you could see people in a PR context very forcefully advising her. I mean, the entertainment industry is not known for being kind to women, or keeping their hands off of their personal choices. So does that mean that it's a power of the conservatorship? I don't even think it can be. So I think Sarah had asked about reproductive choice in conservatorships in general, and whether somebody either in Britney's position, oh, I just mentioned you, Sarah, hi, whether somebody in Britney's position, or maybe even like hypothetically in a much more disabled position, whether that kind of choice can be made for them, because potentially somebody way further on the spectrum of like not fully recognizing the consequences of their choices and the effect that pregnancy would have on the body, the effect of sexual activity, and potentially not being able to care for that child if it came into the world. And, you know, once it exists, it could be a whole different thing with CPS if there were a deficiency in care. Can that ever be done? Can you say to somebody, we're going to put in an IUD and not take it out? Technically, the answer is yes, very rarely. I think the context in which I'm more familiar with that being done is in much, much more disabled than Britney. And usually it's birth control, that there will be, oh, there's that one that you can like put under the skin. Is it Mirena? Anyways, So like less intrusive forms, because as a lot of women know, IUD insertion is super painful. And it's a relatively permanent solution as things go. I think it can be like 10 years. But so that choice is a weird one for birth control. But the short answer is that yes, you can, in very compelling cases where you can show like the harm to the person having sexual activity if they were to conceive, yes. But in those cases, it's nobody like Britney. So again, I really, really wonder if that is a power granted by the conservatorship, or if she feels pressured by the conditions at large and the position that her father holds. Because, okay, so here's an example of the scope of what a guardian or conservator can do. Forceful medication, you need a separate motion to do that. So you can write into a conservatorship guardianship decision that, you know, one of the powers that we would grant a lot, if it was necessary, was like power to get people to deny her the chance to get married again. I don't think it, we'll get to that in a second. Oh, hang on, that's my fresh direct. Just ignore it. But, wait, what was I talking about? I forget. My fresh direct took my brain. Let me drink about it. Forcible medication. So, what the court can grant power to after the initial showing is like directing medical treatment. So that means stuff like what doctors you go to, taking somebody to and from the appointments, ensuring, and again, we honestly had trouble with this because you can't enforce it. You can say that the guardian has the power to strongly encourage that they go to their psychiatrist appointments, but anybody can do that. Like, that's just talking to somebody. And if they want to forcibly medicate, that's another step. And that's something that we would not empower them to do, because you can't without a different level of showing. It's a due process bodily autonomy thing. You can do it. Now, if you came back to the court after the power to like strongly encourage medication, and you said, hey, they are refusing this, there is very imminent harm that's going to come from this, because usually it has to be something like physical or dire, like they are threatening to kill themselves and they have a knife under their pillow that they're using. Then it might be urgent enough that the court would be like, all right, in this case, you can treat them, you can take them to an inpatient facility, but even there, you can only medicate and treat them forcibly until they're stable again. So until they've reached some sort of stasis, then you have to discharge, and it's kind of an imperfect cycle, because then that just happens over and over again. It's like, okay, then you lose the power because it's no longer a dire threat, they're stabilized, and then if they choose to go off their medication once they're stable again, then they have to devolve back to a state of being less well. And then do the whole process again if you want to forcibly medicate them. So this will get to the marriage question. My concern, and this is not at all out of a lack of concern and compassion for Britney, but based on what the law allows you to do, I really wonder if, and my suspicion would be, that a lot of the things that she is citing as feeling very pressured to do are essentially like psychological coercion from the man who is her father and also her conservator. So that's a great basis to remove him as conservator, because he's certainly abusing his power if that's true. But the key difference is that it's not because he's conservator. It's not that he has actually been granted the legal power to do this stuff. It's just that given the nature of their relationship and this added power that he has, he can certainly get away with a lot more. And I would argue that their whole life has kind of probably set up the example for him to do this. Enough. So I think the biggest problem potentially would be that, oh, there is actually a regular checkup. That's a good question, and I didn't mean to talk about this. So there are annual reports where an independent party, I will murder this Fresh Direct driver for bringing me the things that I ordered. But so an independent party who is only affiliated with the court, and they're very poorly paid. They're really, really good people who go through this arduous training and have to go into like lice-infested houses. I love this man. So like these are good people. There's no incentive for them to do the wrong thing, but they will go out for these annual checks and they'll look at the bank records. You have to, no, I don't need to get the door because that means I have to go downstairs and I have to be a pack mule and carry everything out. Ugh, I'll just wait it out. But so they report back to the court on an annual basis, and then the court sits down with them and interviews them based on whatever information they came back with. So if they ring again, I will probably go down. Thank you. But so there was actually an instance in 2016 from the court investigator, that's this independent person, from the court investigator who said that Britney expressed concern for and dislike about her dad being the conservator. I know you will, Kate. You'll take your titties out. Now, again, if we take the names off of this, because obviously Britney has a lot of fans, there are a lot of eyebrow-raising situations because her estate is so financially well-heeled. That is not the average situation, but like everybody can be said to have a vested interest if you have millions on millions of dollars, because like everybody has something to gain. And yeah, conservatives, Kate's one from that's my girl. And conservators or guardians are paid out of the estate of the incapacitated person. Because again, like the court investigators, it can be a very thankless job. I mean, think about the other cases. If you were here up top, these are really, they're emotionally trying as hell. There's not a lot of like reward because the people don't want you there. And this is kind of what I was getting around to saying with Britney, that if somebody is competent enough to express an opinion, a lot of times, think about like if anybody has a grandparent or aging relative with dementia, people don't like to lose their capacity. And oftentimes they will fight tooth and nail against the person who is the agent of that. So not saying that it's not different with Britney, because it does seem like her dad is in an abusive position and he has a past of being abusive, and there are a lot of really muddy boundaries. But the fact that a ward, so to speak, expressed to a court investigator that they don't want the guardian in place anymore is not even kind of uncommon. So without other evidence, and this is what we don't know, it could exist. It could exist in spades. Everybody could be in on it. I don't know. Or it could not exist, or any shade of gray in between. So all I know is that from what's been released to the public, which again is like, obviously it's not all going to be released to the public because damn, why would they? How do I balance anger or sympathy? Oh boy. That's how I try to stay sane in general. I think it helps me to craft solutions better if I can separate the two. And oftentimes getting emotion muddled up where it doesn't need to be, or doesn't deserve to be kind of, can lead to imperfect and sometimes damaging solutions, like getting rid of conservatorships altogether, which would leave thousands of people in very, very dangerous positions. So just like supplanting Britney in your head sometimes with somebody else. Imagine someone who doesn't have family and doesn't have the money, but is in a psychiatric hold, and maybe they could become homeless down the line. Maybe they are going to lose medical coverage if somebody doesn't take care of that. So, guardianship isn't elder care. Okay, hang on. Yes, that is a huge thing. So, because, like I was saying with dementia, a very, very common circumstance where people need conservators or guardians, and this also kind of ties into how do you separate empathy for public figures and the situation. I mean, I think this poor girl was probably abused from day one, and I just have so much sympathy for her raising and what both her family and the media at large did to her, that there are so many dirty hands here. It's just about looking at whether, and we may never know whether this was fully just or not, because honestly, I don't think they should release all this stuff in her lifetime, unless she wants to, and she does have the power to do that at any point. So that, to me, is also a little telling just in a strictly objective sense. She also has not petitioned to have her father removed. She has said it out loud, but the court can't, like, act without a petition. That's a side note. So, back to the elder thing. So, that being a really common circumstance where this comes up, it's hard. It's really hard to adequately police these things when family is involved. There is, once in the system, you're kind of stuck in it. No, you're not stuck in it. You can petition to get out, but you gotta do it. So imagine and Kate, I will circle back to the elder thing because that is such a common use of this, but imagine it's a custody case, because that's a similar idea of like who has decision-making power. And you stand up and you make a statement to the court, like an opening statement or a speech, and you make a lot of arguments about why you feel it should be a certain way, but then you don't file papers, you don't do any of the formal court proceeding pieces, and that's kind of where we are now. So Britney has made this impassioned plea, and I think it's a wonderful start. If there's stuff to back it up, I hope that they file it. I hope she has adequate representation, because that's one of the things that I'm honestly most concerned about. Is there was something a couple years back where she didn't have power to pick her own attorney. And so if somebody's messing with who represents her, she can't be expected to know. And if that person is in the pocket, that's the biggest practical concern. I don't know if it's the case, but whoever it is representing her, and every person in this position, in the position of getting a guardian or conservator, has a right to an attorney. Kind of like Miranda rights, that you're facing losing your freedom, so you do have an attorney at any point that you want to make a different, like a change to the situation. But as of the last articles that I've read, and in spite of this speech that she made in front of the court and publicly, nobody has filed an actual motion to remove, or a petition, I think in this case, to remove her father as conservator. So I don't know what that means. Does that mean that a lawyer is misrepresenting her? Maybe. Does it mean that a lawyer has said, we don't have any evidence that is different from the last time we filed? Maybe. Does it mean that they're working on a filing? Maybe. So that's kind of, you're definitely not stuck in it, and you can reevaluate, especially with these annual court investigator reports back to the court. Those are, like, even beyond putting the responsibility on the person to have to know to file and get in touch with the court, somebody from the court is checking in with you annually. And that doesn't mean that they're going to do the whole investigation of, like, in your favor for you if you want to get out of it. But that could be a great place to start if you have a concern. And so, yeah, Britney did say, I believe the evidence we have is at least in 2016 she expressed concern about her dad. And that's all we know. Again, a lot of wards say that. And again, I think that whether or not her dad is her conservator, I would have concerns about him as a person to her. So it's like, it's a really tricky situation about drawing the line. Another example in the Britney case, she said that her dad controlled her, and like she felt pressured that she couldn't even paint her cabinets a different color. That's not a power that ever would be granted by a conservatorship. So that would not be a court-given power. That would be a legal power that the dad would have, that you cannot change the color of your cabinets. But there we see that obviously the fact that he's empowered in this legal setting gives a different sort of feeling to it, and packs a lot more punch. And I'm sure somebody like him would say to her, like, I can do this. He could lie. He could straight up lie. He could lie and forcibly medicate her, but that's him doing something illegal rather than the court granting an illegal power. So there's kind of a distinction there. Court system's supposed to be such a Byzantine nightmare. I honestly think it's how you see it from the outside, because I get it. Now, like, people who are in this, it's years of being so deep in this and, like, reading petitions, and we're just seeing such a tiny slice from the outside. And I do think that what may make it seem Byzantine is also what is designed to catch all these things that fall through holes. And usually it does. Usually, like Kate had mentioned, the elderly cases, those things do get caught by the court. So, I know, Byzantine nightmare. Would he be able to control that? Yeah, circuitously, potentially. Like, so he could withhold money if she, like, wanted to paint it one color. But again, that's not that he has the legal power to do that. It's kind of that he is wielding his power in an unjust and potentially illegal way. And so then he could face charges, he could be removed, any lawyers who are involved with this could face sanctions, but you gotta present the court with that evidence. So I hope that somebody does, or has, but until or unless there is a petition filed to remove the dad that cites things like that, the court can't. We don't want the court reaching out and doing its own thing. The court can only act, it's called sua sponte, if the court reaches out and is like, nobody moved for this, but we're going to decide it's right to do this, and we're going to do X, Y, Z. It may sound good in some circumstances, but it basically could become a dictatorship when they have the kind of power that they do to make decisions, and then they initiate the actions. It's a good idea. It's one of those hole-catching checks and balances designs in the Byzantine nightmare that tends to do more good than harm. Okay, let me see. I'm thinking I've probably thrown enough into your brain that you're saturated. Oh, one thing that I did want to say. So there's a preference for appointing family as guardians because, well, number one, a practical concern. There just aren't a lot of people out there who are saintly enough to want to serve as guardians to complete strangers, usually for very little compensation, because it's usually not Britney Spears, and a thankless job, and no fun. So it's a small pool, and then, like, reporting back to the court, it's kind of hellish. I wouldn't do it, I don't think. So there's a preference for family out of practicality, and then there's also the presumption, and this is a rebuttable presumption, so you can give evidence that this is not the case, but there is a presumption that family tends to have more of the best interest of this person at heart than a complete stranger would. But again, that's rebuttable. But it's really tough, and again, thinking about expanding, even though we're looking at Britney's case now, expanding maybe to understand why the law is certain ways, and putting somebody else in that position and thinking, why is this here? Are there situations that would make this make more sense? And oftentimes, if there's a family member who wants to serve, that is such a gift from the heavens, because otherwise, there's going to be a point where we just run out of people willing to serve as guardians, and it's kind of a race against time and funding in each borough here. But I wish that somebody had done more up front to talk about the abuse in her dad's past. Oh, Kate McKenna wants to be in my video. Wait, are you here? I don't know. I don't know what I've done. I thought I was including Kate, but it didn't work. Well, I guess I'll go get my groceries now because there was ice cream in it, but you know, mint chocolate chip is really good. Oh, hey, Kate's here.
Hi.
Hi, what's up?
You dropped out for a second, so I'm not sure if you already covered this. I wanted to ask verbally because they need to fix the user interface for Instagram Live because it is so hard
I
to
feel like
write
I
a
missed
long
some,
message.
and I'm really sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just that they like make it so you can't make a long message and see what you wrote, and then I'm just like, am I gonna write something that is really silly? Yeah, anyway, hi everyone. I'm in lockdown in Sydney. Isn't that fun?
In here all the way from Australia, which for once is doing worse than the US. So.
Well, I mean, you guys have the Delta variant everywhere right now, but
only for the non-vaccinated people.
Yeah, but people, the thing is that when you have the Delta variant, because it's so insidious, vaccinated people can spread it, which ain't great.
I know, I have heard that.
Yeah.
You can call it Jamie. Oh, Franklin Delano Pug loves your glasses. I do too.
Thank you. They're from Warby Parker. I had them shipped to Australia because I wanted them so much.
Wait, okay. So hit me with your whatever question. My neck is literally sweating in this heat.
We can talk about the failures of the Morrison government later, but so I wanted to ask a few questions. One is so I guess this is more of the umbrella question. So people who are calling to abolish conservatorship and guardianship, well, first I think that people like words that we're using for other things, so I think that's one thing. But the other thing
it's an easy answer too. It's like it's the tip of the iceberg for the public at large, and also it's a very emotive response. So I forget who had asked before about separating like the empathetic response from the knee-jerk sort of legal side, and you see it's human. It's like wanting to slap someone, and you want to reach out and do something to prevent this from ever happening again. So I do get it, but oh my gosh.
So I guess the question is what, from your perspective, having handled a lot of cases on the legal side of things, what are things that do need to be improved in the system? Because obviously it's not perfect. It's a Byzantine nightmare.
Right. Honestly, that's true of the legal system at large. This is why we go to law school and then we come out and we have to take a test to prove that we learned enough.
Yeah, that Kim Kardashian can't pass. But
and then you only have to get like a D on the test to be allowed to, so it's a
really mess. I didn't know that.
You have to pass. Okay. It's like a pass-fail thing, so technically that I think is like 60 plus, right? I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I passed, so I didn't ask questions.
You did well.
I probably don't want to. But yeah, so this is a great question because I think I actually missed some folks who did ask about what needs to change. A couple iterations of the same idea, like what can help, like does the standard need to be tweaked? Does there need to be different oversight? And I'm trying to think, like so many things, A, I wish there were an easy answer, and B, a lot of it is societal thinking. It's like we need to give more credence to women making reproductive choices, so we recognize this as a medical choice, recognize the choice to bring children into the world as weighty as it is, freedom to explore different options without stigma, whether that be Plan B, a lot of different things. That's one thing. Treating disabled people with respect so that there isn't so much reason to fear when you hear things like this. Because if we only saw this kind of thing happening when people legitimately could not make decisions for themselves, there would be a lot less like knee-jerk terror when you hear about something like forced reproductive control,
Right.
And I know that you're somebody who advocates for disability rights and whatnot too, it's really easy to confuse in common parlance these days, like physical disability with mental disability, different degrees of disability, mental illness, and intellectual disability. Like, so we need to get better at that.
Yeah, I mean, like, because the common saying is that like disability is the most common marginalization because like globally there are I don't remember the exact statistic, but there are a lot of disabled people depending on your
How do we
definition
define
of
it? Right.
disability. Yeah, and I think that well, yeah, there's just the being disabled, you're rife for abuse, right? Because
And
people
I
can
think
make a lot.
women,
Yeah.
especially.
Yeah, 100%. I do think one thing that was really troubling, and I think disabled people, like advocates for disability advocates,
Yes.
were getting frustrated with was that some people were saying that things that were happening to Britney would only happen to women, which is not true because men with disabilities are abused a lot.
Yeah,
And you
and
know they have
certainly
the
even on the
higher rate
rightful
of,
side, like
yeah.
you also see men and women subject to rightful guardianships and conservatorships. So I don't fully agree, but I also think that if you, especially when it's mental illness mixed into it, it's super, super easy for a bunch of old straight white men to be like, oh, crazy little pop star, I remember when you shaved your head, and what woman in her right mind would want to get rid of that sexy hair? So let's just not review this again.
Right. Yeah, and
I
like
think
I
it's a
mean,
little different, but
yeah, I mean that you know things that are tweets are are not
yeah,
exactly.
exactly. It's like Twitter legislation, which would be so scary if it were real. And I wish
Yeah, I
people
mean
wouldn't say
Twitter
it so
legislation
explicitly.
would bring back guillotining, so I'm not sure if we want
And then
that.
we would have nobody, and then maybe it would be peace on earth. So.
I mean, there are people who think that that's the best case scenario. Circling back to
Oh,
the
you were asking about policy changes too.
yeah, just
So
policy changes. I'm kind of just interviewing you now at this
no,
point.
this is
But yeah,
actually super great because I lose track of my own brain. You see it. But so one thing that I do think could change on the court end, because I come at this from a super like halcyon, no, I don't want to say naive because it comes from experience with a really good judge and in a really good system. Like in New York State, even with the flaws that we have a whole agency called Mental Hygiene Legal Services, and they provide free attorneys to people who are facing guardianship free of charge every time. Like you have to serve them with every petition just in case somebody needs their help. And then they'll represent them and they'll advocate like hell for whatever that person needs. So, like, New York is a very good system. My judge was, he wouldn't even give them a hearing unless they came in the door with evidence of the harm that this person was going to face. But I'm sure not every judge does that. It was even clear in our practice that some lawyers who practice elsewhere were expecting it to be rubber stamped, kind of. So I don't know how you control for that.
I mean, the thing is that a lot of the so like when we talk about the cases where in elder care where people or
Yes.
just anybody who's over 50, which I wouldn't.
Oh god, no,
There's
65.
yeah.
Let's do 65.
Yeah, but
Hey,
there are
Alex.
people who are no, but this issue does it like once you hit 50, this issue does affect you. Where you know if you so like there was a case that I was just reading about before I decided to ask you this question to make sure I knew what I was talking about.
Oh, good, yeah.
Yeah, so for example, there's this lady who was I think she was in Indiana or something like that, and she was 50 and she was a marketing executive at Sam's Club
Oh.
and she got a traumatic brain injury from falling down the stairs.
Mm-hmm.
And while she was getting care, they weren't sure if she was going to recover, and she didn't have anybody appointed to take care of her if anything happened, right? And like her legal
Yeah.
side of things. But then the guardian, the lawyer who was appointed to her case, her aunt ended up stepping in to help, but also the lawyer who was
That's
in her
good.
case
Her aunt should have gotten
while
notice.
she was. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
So this, I don't know what Indiana does, and this is a good, maybe another good policy suggestion is that, like, I don't know that all states are
Oh,
as
just kidding. It was
progressive.
Tennessee. Sorry, it was Tennessee. Keep going.
Oh, okay, but even still, and I don't know that this would apply to Britney's case either, because I imagine California and New York tend to be pretty progressive, and in these types of cases, that usually means more protection for marginalized groups, for people facing losing their rights. It usually tends to be a good thing for these types of things, so it wouldn't necessarily prevent Britney's case, but Indiana is a mixed bag, and I could see that being one where they don't have laws. Like in New York State, you have to notify all the known family members of the hearing happening so that they can come in and show up and be like, hey, I would like to be part of this decision making. And if there is a preference for family, put me in there. And that could prevent what you're talking about.
Yeah, so basically what happened once the person came in as her guardian, and she was put in a home for mentally disabled adults, and she recovered. She was
Like an
fine.
asylum or a rehab facility?
Like a rehab facility for like advanced aging people who are mentally incapacitated.
Okay.
Yeah, and she was fine, and she was put there for 2 years. And while she was there, she was fine. She like obviously not at first, but recovered, was fully functioning. While she was while she was there, shortly after going there, her house was sold. All of her belongings were sold, and that was done by the guardian. So that's I shouldn't say common, but it's
that's
a thing
really
that
scary.
happens, and it's a
And
way
that's
that the system's abused. So, and it's
right.
hard to control for, as you're saying, but I think that those are the types of things when people are criticizing the
I
system.
think
That's
you're
what they're
right.
talking about. Yeah.
And honestly, like when I used to do this work and be with the judge that was doing these types of cases, it's kind of like how I feel about a lot of legislative responses now to the opioid crisis, that we're as things trickle down through the media, and I don't know that this is good or bad. Maybe things should come to public light first, but it's the nature of the beast. But once things get to public consumption, oftentimes, knock on wood, somebody has caught it in a legislative sense before. So for this type of thing, again, don't know about the likes of Tennessee or Indiana or a lot of the slower to progress states, which is not a slur. It is true in terms of legal changes. But like the knee jerk that a lot of people might have now has already been caught in the system, and we used to dread when an article would come out, like when that I Care a Lot movie with what's her fucking name? I love her. She's cute. Rosamund Pike. When that came out, I was like, oh my god, this is gonna be hell because this is so inaccurate, and it's gonna make it seem like guardians can like come in. Whereas most of the people that we had were in NYCHA housing, so they're already on Section 8, like public subsidized housing, and they were facing losing those benefits. So it's like, no, there's nothing to steal in the first place, and there's nothing to even pay the guardian. So we're lucky if somebody, some good-hearted person who we have to call again off the fiduciary list and be like, hi, we got another one, and they're gonna hate you. So like that, at least where we are, that had been caught already. Hopefully, if there are states that are outstanding like that, this will be the kind of push for them. But it's tough to know how to react to that type of call if the legislation is already there in New York and California and places like that.
Yeah. Hey, SJ. I think the thing too, just broadly, is that a lot of the times when any sort of hot button issue or anything that has to do with abuse of any sort, right? Whether that be corruption or things like this.
I mean, her dad is gonna abuse her till the day he dies. Like whether he is conservator or not, he's a piece of work, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily in the Britney case, but just in general. Like,
thank you so much for joining.
Thanks. My chat's really like if any. I haven't been looking at it. I'm sorry if
I'm kind of paying attention. I saw Alex come up.
Oh, my mom was on it. That's nice. Anyway, Yeah, anyway, but I think that people sometimes assume that nobody is working on fixing issues.
Right.
Um, like when you have something that's in the news, you just assume that
Yeah.
like, oh, this is so bad. Somebody needs to fix this. And then the people who've been trying to fix things for 15 years
Yeah.
are like,
And there's a
yeah,
little
we
bit of
know.
arrogance. There's an
Yeah.
arrogance of social media too that it's like, um, and I don't. It comes from such a good place, so I hesitate to even say it like this. But as somebody who is more inclined to like spitball with you, like you're not a lawyer, you're not in the U.S., but you have cogent concerns, and this is the type of thing that is better at coming up with solutions. Not like I have any power, but like this type of thing is good. What's not good and what pisses me off is people thinking like, you think none of us thought of that? Do you think that like all of us who have been doing this for years didn't think just like get rid of the system and didn't weigh that against like
Yeah, I mean that's like all public policy, right? Like
right,
that's
yeah,
just like that's all you think about in public policy, and it's just like,
yeah.
well, what if we just turn it off and turn it back on? What if
It's
we just do
literally
that?
that. It's
Yeah,
literally that. But just like let's turn it off and keep it off. Then we
yeah,
don't think about it.
yes,
Well, I guess we'll have our phone conversation on Saturday, my time, Sunday, your
yes.
time. But I'm so glad that you jumped in because this, I think, was elucidating for people who aren't in my Byzantine mess of a brain. So
Well, it's just it's
you can
it's a
interpret.
the benefit of Instagram not improving their user interface.
And
Anyway,
also
bye.
not allowing nipples. I will always be semi mad about that, even if I still use the platform.
They let you have nipples. Okay, here's an incentive. There's all these articles coming out about how women aren't having children anymore, right? So you're allowed to show nip if you're breastfeeding. So
Okay.
I
So Photoshop your
mean,
favorite baby in. Oh, I'm so glad you thought so. I thought so too.
thanks.
Um,
I just
I
have a
just
political
uh,
science degree.
I
Anyway,
just heard that breastfeeding mothers, they just now made an exception so that breastfeeding Olympian mothers can bring their babies to the Olympics. But before that, they weren't going to let them. Oh, and they also were going to make the babies stay in a separate place. They're like, but they can't stay in Olympic Village and you can't bring a partner. So the baby has to go like stay in a hotel room.
you know what's a Byzantine nightmare? Trying to breastfeed. If I
I've
hang
never
out,
done it, but God knows I've watched others do it and can't imagine. So
yeah. Listen, I haven't breastfed. I don't want to. It sounds painful, but I mean, like, do I want to feed a baby in a bathroom stall? No. Do I
no.
want other people to?
Do
No.
I want
That's
to do
insane.
anything in a bathroom stall? Even go to the bathroom? No.
I mean,
So,
what are you propositioning?
oh, I can't. Jamie Spears says I can't.
Oh, damn it! Not again.
I can't go out tonight. Jamie Spears says I can't. That's my new excuse. Is that in poor taste or is it in solidarity? I can't tell. It's meant to
Um,
be nice to
I
her.
think it's in solidarity. I don't think that she's watching, so I think you're safe.
I think you're probably right. And okay, so this will be my closing point because I think a lot of what I've said and what I think is could be taken as being like not supportive, but it's more just we don't know a lot, as we shouldn't. Like we shouldn't have access to her medical and psych records.
Yeah.
But I fully support her whether she needs a conservator or not. And I think even if she does, it probably shouldn't be the people who've been doing it. Let's just mix it up. She can afford it. She is one of the people who they can get a lot of other folks to try it out. But regardless of the legal positioning, the empathy side is this poor girl has just been used and abused probably since she was an infant. And I don't even know how we fix that societally except do better next time. Holy shit. Stop treating women like this. Stop treating celebrities like they're commodities. Women,
I,
like children, women, like they're sex things.
I do
Man, I
think
don't know.
I mean, one glimmer of hope I do see is that Britney is one of the last holdouts of like the former era of people who are in entertainment, whether they be singers or actors or whatever, not having agency over their image, whereas social media, even though it's a hellscape,
Yeah.
has been really good for that, because if you run your own Instagram account, or like if you have agency over
Right.
what you're putting out into the world and giving less credence to paparazzi and
Yeah, or even
what
like
narrative
whoever
they decide.
your
Yeah.
keepers are. Like I was thinking, I had said before, like she could release court papers, and whether everybody thinks that's prudent, that would be up to her and her counsel. But the fact is, that couldn't have been done 10 years ago. Well, 10, yeah, maybe, but like 20 years ago, you couldn't just decide unilaterally. I don't think this is fair. I have a platform that nobody has control of in the same way. Unless they do, I mean, maybe they could, if they can control her passwords, they can probably do that. But it seems like she has ways to get out in that sense. But
Yeah.
one thing that, like, this is a whole nother rabbit hole, but one that I think you and I would very much agree on and go down gladly, is the different communication styles of women and men, and how that gap is. We're seeing so many examples of the danger of that gap, right? Like the fact that women aren't really cultured to say things directly and aggressively. I mean, she said in her statement to the court, like, sorry, I've been pretending everything's okay for so long. Like, passive compliance, but like quietly screaming out is such a difference in gendered expression. And I don't know how we deal with that. I don't know if we bring men more down to where we are, or teach women to speak out more, probably something in the middle. But I think of that gap with so many injustices that I would like the law to address, but it's probably society too.
Yeah, I don't think you can bring law into that sort of change.
Yeah.
I think that that's something that we need to be, I guess, better communicators in general, right? Like that's what I talk about a lot. Like just talking about communication
Yeah.
is kind
But
of
that puts the
my
burden
bad.
on women to do the uncomfortable
Yeah.
thing, which I don't fully. I think that women should be taught and should learn to be more overt, but it's hard. I think consent, this is a huge thing. Like there was a movement to try to legislate it, and I could see both sides to that, of like affirmative enthusiastic consent, but men
Yeah,
aren't really trained to look for that. They're looking for like somebody overtly saying no.
yeah, I think that just having a better understanding of reading people. Well, the thing is with in her case, right, is that
Mhm.
I think because of how traumatic her experience with the media has been,
Yeah.
historically, even if she, knew that she could speak out in the way that she did now, like 5 years ago, I'm
Probably
not
wouldn't have
sure
been the
she
same.
would have. Yeah, no,
And
I'm
who
not sure.
knows if the response would have been the same. I mean, again, like 5 years, we're getting into, all right, there was a bit of a Trump wave and backlash there, but like support for celebrity women speaking out about mental illness and personal autonomy and reproductive health is not the same. It wasn't. So,
Yeah, I mean, ever since, I mean, specifically with celebrity, since late 2017 with Me Too, I think
right,
that
right.
that was the big change. I mean, there was
And
a
even that
little,
faced backlash. People
yeah,
didn't
there was
like
little
that.
bits and pieces here and there, and now we have this whole wave of celebrity documentaries of people telling their side of the story, like
And Bill
with
Cosby
Jennifer
going
Lotto.
free.
Yeah, yeah, we
But
can talk about that. That's the
I
first thing
know.
I saw when I woke up today.
Good
I
morning.
jumped on here right after I woke up, so I put
Oh,
on
good
lipstick
morning.
in case
You
I
look
was gonna
cute.
jump on. Thanks.
I'm
Yeah.
breaking out, so I can't say anything. But before I sign off, I will try to at least bring all that home by saying, like, the common denominator with a lot of these female injustices and their encounters with the law, or questions about if policy should address it, the common denominator is like the women have been quietly screaming. Whether it be the most famous woman or me or you, it's so that always is when we think about like solutions in a long-term sense to prevent this from happening. There's a gap in communication and awareness and concerned. I don't know who the agency has to come from, maybe all parties, but like, damn, this woman was suffering for so long and we just kind of didn't. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's a good ribbon to put on it. That's
Not to put
wraps
too
it all
fine a
up.
point on it.
Yeah.
Make a little
Anyway,
birdhouse
well,
in your soul. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining, Kate, and I hope that this was useful to folks, and I hope I figure out how to save it.
have a good rest of your night, everyone.
And truly free Britney from whatever hell, whether it be legal or otherwise. Bring this poor woman some peace. God damn it.
Free Britney, that's right.
All right.
Bye.
Over and out.